I'm 68 years old, lying face down on my kitchen floor, blood dripping from my nose onto the same tiles I scrubbed every morning for 40 years. My daughter just dragged me by my hair out of the house I built, the house I called home. Over $3 million. But someone was watching, someone who would change everything. This is my story. I'm Margaret Davis, and I need to tell you what really happened that day when my perfect family life shattered into a million pieces. 5 years ago, when my husband Robert passed away from a sudden heart attack, I thought my world had ended. We'd built our 4-bedroom house in a quiet Ohio neighborhood back in 1983, when Jennifer was just 7 years old. Robert and we poured everything into that house. Every weekend project, every holiday dinner, every birthday party, those walls held 40 years of our life together. The house wasn't fancy when we bought it, but Robert had good hands. He expanded the kitchen, finished the basement, added a deck where we'd sit every evening watching the sunset. By the time he died, our little house had become something special. The neighborhood had grown around us, property values had skyrocketed, and suddenly our modest family home was worth over $3 million. But money was the last thing on my mind when I buried my husband. I just felt lost, empty. The house felt too big, too quiet. I'd wake up every morning, and for a split second, I'd forget he was gone. I'd reach over to his side of the bed, or I'd make 2 cups of coffee out of habit. That's when Jennifer suggested she and her family move in with me. "Mom, you shouldn't be alone in that big house," she said, her voice full of concern. "Michael and I have been talking, and we think it would be good for everyone. The kids could have more space, and we could take care of you." It seemed like a blessing. Jennifer, my only child, the little girl I'd spent my whole life loving and protecting, wanted to come home. Her husband Michael seemed supportive, and their 2 children, Emma, 8, and little Tommy, 5, they were my world. The idea of having my grandchildren under the same roof, of hearing their laughter fill those quiet rooms again, it felt like life was giving me a second chance at happiness. So they moved in. Michael quit his job at the insurance company, said the commute from my house would be too long anyway. Jennifer kept working as a dental hygienist, but now she didn't have to worry about daycare costs. It was perfect, or so I thought. I threw myself into being useful again. Every morning, I'd wake up at 6 to start breakfast. Pancakes for the kids, coffee and eggs for Jennifer and Michael. I'd pack Emma's lunch, make sure Tommy had his favorite stuffed animal for preschool. After they all left, I'd clean the house, do the laundry, plan dinner. When Jennifer came home tired from work, dinner would be ready and waiting. Pot roast on Sundays, spaghetti and meatballs on Wednesdays. All the meals she'd loved as a child. I'd help the kids with homework while she relaxed, give them baths, read bedtime stories. On weekends, I'd take them to the park or the library while Jennifer and Michael had time to themselves. I handled all the household bills too. The electricity, water, gas, property taxes, insurance. Everything came out of my Social Security and Robert's pension. It never bothered me. This was my house, my family. Taking care of them felt natural, right? It gave me purpose again. I remember one evening, about 6 months after they'd moved in, I was cleaning up after dinner when Jennifer hugged me from behind. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered, "for everything. I don't know what we'd do without you." My heart swelled with joy. This was what family was supposed to be about. Taking care of each other, being there when needed. I felt useful again. Needed. Loved. But looking back now, lying here on my kitchen floor with blood on my face, I realized that was probably the last time Jennifer ever said thank you. The changes started small. Little things I tried to ignore because I wanted so desperately to believe we were happy. Michael began speaking differently, not to me, but about the house. He'd point out things that needed fixing, talk about improvements we should make, using "we" like he was part owner. When the insurance adjuster came by for the annual review, Michael insisted on being present, asking detailed questions about coverage and replacement costs. Jennifer started having whispered conversations with Michael that would stop the moment I entered a room. They'd be huddled over papers at the kitchen table, but would quickly close laptops or shuffle documents away when I appeared. "Just work stuff, Mom," Jennifer would say with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. The warmth began to fade from our interactions. Jennifer stopped asking about my day, stopped sharing stories about hers. When I'd try to tell her about something funny Tommy had done or show her pictures I'd taken of Emma at the park, she'd give distracted nods and change the subject. Michael's attitude grew more obvious. He'd walk through the house like he was inspecting it, making comments about outdated fixtures or discussing renovation projects we needed to consider. He started referring to certain rooms as his office or our master bedroom, even though they were sleeping in what had been Jennifer's childhood room. The worst part was how they treated my opinions about my own house. When I mentioned that I didn't want to replace the kitchen cabinets Robert had built by hand, Michael would roll his eyes. "Margaret, you can't let sentiment get in the way of necessary improvements," he'd say. "We need to think about property value." "We?" I wanted to ask. Since when was this we? But I bit my tongue. I told myself they were just trying to help, that they cared about maintaining the house properly. I convinced myself that their growing distance was just the natural adjustment period of 3 generations living together. I should have paid more attention to the phone calls. I was folding laundry in the basement when I heard Michael's voice drifting down from the kitchen above. The old house had thin floors, and his voice carried. "She's 68, Jennifer. How much longer can this go on? We're basically running a nursing home here." My hands froze on the towel I was folding. "I know, but she's my mother, Michael. It's complicated." "Complicated, Jenny? This house is worth over $3 million. $3 million. Do you understand what that means for our future? For Emma and Tommy's college funds? And we're just waiting? Waiting for what?" Jennifer's voice was barely a whisper. "You know what? How long do people her age typically live? She could hang on for another 15, 20 years. By then, who knows what the market will look like? And if she gets sick, if she needs care, there goes a huge chunk of that value anyway." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I sank down onto the basement steps, clutching the laundry basket. "So what are you suggesting?" Jennifer asked. "I'm suggesting we need to think practically here. Maybe it's time to have a conversation about transferring ownership, for tax purposes, you understand. Estate planning. We could take care of her for the rest of her life, but at least we'd have security." She'd never agree to that. She might if we approached it right. Emphasis on family legacy, avoiding probate, protecting her interests. "I've been doing research on this, Jennifer. There are ways to handle these situations." My daughter was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded different, colder. "Let me think about it." I sat in that basement for an hour after they'd moved to another room, trying to process what I'd heard. These were the people I'd welcomed into my home, the people I cooked for and cleaned for and loved with everything I had, and they were discussing my death like a business opportunity. That night at dinner, I watched them differently. I noticed how Michael's eyes would scan the dining room, calculating. I saw how Jennifer avoided meeting my gaze when I asked about her day. Even the children seemed more distant, though I told myself I was imagining that part. "How was your day, sweetheart?" I asked Jennifer, the same question I'd asked every evening for months. "Fine," she said, not looking up from her plate. "Anything interesting happen at the office?" "Not really." Michael jumped in. "Actually, we've been thinking about some updates to the house. The real estate market is really hot right now. Might be smart to make some improvements, you know? Increase the value." There was that word again. Value. Not home, not family legacy, not the place where Jennifer had grown up and where Robert and I had loved each other for 40 years. Just value. "I like the house the way it is," I said quietly. Michael's jaw tightened. "Margaret, with all due respect, some of these fixtures are from the 1980s. The market expects certain standards now." "It's my house," I said. my voice barely above a whisper. The silence that followed was deafening. Jennifer finally looked up, and the expression on her face made my blood run cold. It was the look you'd give a stubborn child, not your mother. "Of course it is, Mom," she said, but her tone suggested otherwise. "Michael just means we want to help you maintain it properly." But I knew what I'd heard in that basement, and I knew that everything I'd believed about my loving family taking care of me was built on a lie. They weren't here to take care of me. They were here to wait for me to die. The confrontation I'd been dreading finally came 3 weeks later. I'd spent those weeks watching, listening, trying to convince myself I'd misunderstood, but the signs were everywhere once I knew what to look for. Jennifer had started handling phone calls from the insurance company, talking to them like she was the homeowner. Michael had been researching contractors for renovations I'd never approved. They'd even been showing the house to what they claimed were friends, but I caught one of them taking photos of room layouts and asking detailed questions about the foundation and plumbing. I couldn't pretend anymore. I was in the kitchen making lunch when Jennifer came home early from work. She had papers in her hand and that same tight smile that had replaced her genuine warmth months ago. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, spreading documents across the kitchen table. "Michael and I have been working with a lawyer on some estate planning issues. For your protection." I looked at the papers. Words like transfer of ownership and life estate jumped out at me. My heart started pounding. "What is this, Jennifer?" "It's just paperwork, Mom. Legal stuff to make sure everything is handled properly when, well, in the future. This way, there won't be any probate issues, and you'll be protected if you ever need long-term care." I stared at my daughter. This woman I'd given birth to, nursed through childhood illnesses, cheered for at soccer games, cried with through her first heartbreak. The woman I'd trusted with my life, my home, my heart. "You want me to sign over my house?" "It's not like that, Mom. You'd still live here. We'd still take care of you. It's just a legal formality. A formality that gives you ownership of my $3 million house." Jennifer's mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw something in her eyes that terrified me. Impatience, resentment, like I was an obstacle standing between her and something she deserved. "Mom, you're being dramatic. We're family. We're trying to help you." By taking my house? By planning for the future? By being responsible? Do you want everything Robert worked for to be eaten up by taxes and lawyer fees? Do you want Emma and Tommy to inherit nothing because you were too stubborn to do proper planning? The way she said stubborn made my skin crawl. This wasn't my Jennifer anymore. This was someone I didn't recognize, someone who looked at me like I was a burden, an inconvenience to be managed. "I need to think about this," I said, pushing the papers away. Jennifer's facade cracked completely. "Think about what? This is the smart thing to do, Mom. The responsible thing. I don't understand why you're being so difficult about this." "Because it's my house, Jennifer. Mine and your father's. He left it to me, not to you." The words hung in the air between us like a physical thing. Jennifer's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, anger, hurt, and finally, something that looked almost like hatred. "Fine," she said, gathering up the papers. "Think about it. But Mom, this is happening one way or another. We can do it the easy way, or we can do it the hard way. Your choice." After she left the room, I sat at that kitchen table for hours, staring at the spot where the papers had been. The threat in her words was clear. This wasn't a request anymore. It was a demand. And for the first time since Robert died, I felt truly alone in my own home. The next few weeks were like living in enemy territory. The warmth that had once filled my house, fake as it turned out to be, evaporated completely. Jennifer and Michael stopped including me in conversations. They'd discuss renovation plans and financial decisions right in front of me, talking about when we own the house like I wasn't even there. Dinner became a silent affair. No one asked about my day anymore. No one shared stories or laughed at Tommy's silly jokes. The children, picking up on the tension, became quieter too. Emma started asking me why Mommy seemed angry all the time, and I didn't know what to tell her. I found myself eating alone more often than not. They'd have family dinners without me, or Jennifer would serve everyone else and simply not make a plate for me. When I'd go to cook for myself, I'd find that ingredients I'd bought had mysteriously disappeared, or that there were dirty dishes left everywhere for me to clean up. The house felt like a war zone, where I was the enemy. In my own home. The home where I'd raised my daughter, where I'd loved my husband, where I'd planned to live out my remaining years in peace. Michael's behavior became increasingly aggressive. He'd criticize everything I did, from how I loaded the dishwasher to where I placed my mail. He started making loud phone calls about the property and our timeline, not caring if I overheard. One morning, I woke up to find that my bedroom had been reorganized. My personal documents, bank statements, insurance papers, Robert's will, had been moved. When I asked Jennifer about it, she claimed she was just helping me get organized, but I knew they'd been looking for something. Information about my finances, maybe, or trying to find documents they could use to pressure me. The psychological warfare was constant and exhausting. They'd move my things and then act like I was losing my memory when I couldn't find them. They'd make plans for the house, contractors coming to give estimates, insurance adjusters scheduling visits, without telling me, then act exasperated when I asked questions. "We told you about this, Mom," Jennifer would say with that patronizing tone that made my skin crawl. "You must have forgotten." But I wasn't forgetting. I was being deliberately excluded from decisions about my own property, my own life. The worst part was the isolation. They'd stopped inviting me to family activities. When they took the kids to movies or restaurants, I'd be left behind without explanation. When relatives called, Jennifer would take the phone to another room and have conversations I wasn't included in. I started to feel like a ghost in my own home, invisible and unwanted. I'd catch glimpses of the real conversations when they thought I couldn't hear. Michael talking about contractors who could update the place fast once they had full control. Jennifer discussing lawyers who specialized in difficult family transitions. They were planning my future, my home's future, without me. One evening, I overheard Michael on the phone with someone, maybe a lawyer, maybe a real estate agent. "The issue is the current owner," he was saying. "She's being unreasonable about the transfer. We've tried the gentle approach, but it's not working. We need to explore other options. Legal pressure, maybe? Can we argue incompetence? She's showing signs of confusion, forgetfulness." I wasn't confused or forgetful. I was being systematically excluded and manipulated. But I realized that if this went to court, it would be their word against mine. A loving daughter and son-in-law worried about an aging mother versus an elderly woman they'd paint as stubborn and potentially unfit. That night, I lay in bed listening to the sounds of my own house, Jennifer and Michael talking in hushed tones, the children playing video games, the familiar creaks and settles that had been the soundtrack of my life for 40 years. But now, it all felt foreign, hostile. I thought about Robert, about what he would have done in this situation. He'd always been the stronger one, the one who made the hard decisions. He'd never have let anyone treat me like this, never have allowed our home to become a battlefield. But Robert was gone, and I was alone with the horrible realization that my daughter, the child I'd loved more than my own life, was willing to destroy me for money. As I stared at the ceiling that night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let them take my home, my dignity, my life. I didn't know how I was going to fight them, but I knew I had to try. I just never imagined how violent they were willing to get to take what they wanted. The morning that changed everything started like any other day in my new cold reality. Jennifer left for work without saying goodbye. Michael was in what used to be Robert's office, on the phone with another contractor. The children had already gone to school, and the house settled into its familiar daytime quiet. I was in the kitchen, washing the breakfast dishes that everyone else had left for me, when I heard Michael's voice rising in the next room. "No, that's not acceptable," he was saying. "We need this done as soon as possible. The current situation can't continue much longer. Yes, I understand the legal complications, but there has to be a way to expedite this process. My hand stilled in the soapy water. I knew he was talking about me, about my house, about their plans to take everything away from me. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I was going to fight back. I stood at the kitchen sink, my hands trembling in the dishwater as Michael's voice carried from the next room. Something inside me snapped, not with anger, but with clarity. For months, I'd been questioning myself, wondering if I was being paranoid, if I was misunderstanding their intentions. But hearing him talk about expediting the process of removing me from my own life made everything crystal clear. I dried my hands and walked upstairs to my bedroom, the room I'd shared with Robert for 35 years. I opened the drawer of my nightstand and pulled out the small leather journal I'd kept since Jennifer was born. Robert had given it to me when I came home from the hospital with our newborn daughter. Write down everything, he'd said. The first smile, the first word, the first step. Someday you'll want to remember it all. I flipped through pages of memories I'd recorded over the years. Jennifer's first day of kindergarten. She was so brave, didn't cry at all. Told me she was excited to learn everything. Her 8th birthday. Made her a princess cake from scratch. She said it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen and that I was the best mommy in the world. Page after page of a little girl who loved me completely, who thought I was her hero. When had that changed? When had I become the enemy? I found the entry I was looking for written when Jennifer was 12 years old. Jenny came home crying today because the kids at school were making fun of her shoes. We can't afford new ones right now with Robert's hours cut at the plant. She said it didn't matter because she knew I loved her, and that was more important than anything. As long as I have you and Daddy, and she said, I have everything I need. Tears blurred my vision as I read my own handwriting from over 20 years ago. That little girl who thought love mattered more than money, where had she gone? When did $3 million become more important than the woman who'd given her everything? I kept reading, page after page of memories. The time Jennifer got pneumonia and I sat by her bed for 3 days straight, barely sleeping, making sure she had everything she needed. The way she used to crawl into our bed during thunderstorms, and how I'd stroke her hair until she fell asleep. Her high school graduation when she hugged me so tight and whispered, "Thank you for believing in me, Mom. I wouldn't be here without you." All those years, all that love, all those sacrifices. And now she was planning to take my home and wait for me to die. But as I sat there with my journal, something shifted inside me. I realized that the Jennifer who had written those thank you notes, who had cried in my arms after her first heartbreak, who had called me her best friend on her wedding day, that Jennifer was gone. The woman living in my house now was a stranger wearing my daughter's face, and I didn't owe that stranger anything. I'd spent the last few months trying to be understanding, trying to see their side, trying to keep the peace. I'd been walking on eggshells in my own home, accepting their coldness and manipulation because I was desperate to maintain some semblance of family. But sitting there with 40 years of memories in my lap, I understood something crucial. I wasn't destroying our family by standing up for myself. They had already destroyed it the moment they decided my life was worth less than my property value. I closed the journal and looked around my bedroom. This was my sanctuary, the place where Robert and I had dreamed about our future, where we'd whispered our hopes and fears to each other in the dark, the place where I'd held my newborn daughter and promised her she'd always be safe and loved. I wasn't going to let them take it from me, not without a fight. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in months. I called my neighbor, Patricia Johnson. Patricia and I had been friends for 15 years, ever since she and her husband moved in next door. She was the one who'd brought casseroles after Robert's funeral, who'd checked on me during those dark first months of widowhood. "Margaret," Patricia's voice was warm and surprised. "How are you, honey? I feel like I haven't seen you in forever." I'm not doing well, Patricia," I admitted, my voice breaking slightly. "I need to talk to someone. Can you come over?" Of course, sweetheart, I'll be right there. When Patricia arrived, I realized how long it had been since I'd had a genuine conversation with someone who cared about me. She took one look at my face and wrapped me in a hug that made me break down completely. "Oh, Margaret," she whispered as I sobbed against her shoulder. "What's been happening over here?" I told her everything. The overheard conversations, the legal papers, the way they'd been treating me like an unwanted burden in my own home. Patricia listened without judgment, her expression growing more concerned with every detail. "This is elder abuse, Margaret," she said when I finished. "Financial exploitation, emotional abuse. There are laws against this." "But it's my daughter," I whispered. "How can I fight my own daughter?" Patricia took my hands in hers. "Honey, a real daughter wouldn't do this to you. Family doesn't manipulate and threaten and plot against each other. What you're describing isn't family. It's predatory behavior." She was right, and hearing someone else say it made everything clearer. I wasn't being paranoid or difficult. I was being victimized by people who were supposed to love and protect me. "What should I do?" I asked. "First, you need to document everything. Write down every conversation, every threat, every incident. Second, you need legal help. There are attorneys who specialize in elder abuse cases. And third," Patricia paused, looking uncomfortable. "Margaret, you need to be prepared for this to get ugly. If they're willing to manipulate you psychologically, there's no telling how far they might go to get what they want." Her words sent a chill through me, but I knew she was right. That evening, after Patricia left, I started a new journal. This one wasn't for happy memories. It was for evidence. I wrote down every detail I could remember from the past few months, every overheard conversation, every instance of manipulation or intimidation. As I wrote, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: power. For the first time since this nightmare began, I was taking action instead of just reacting. I was fighting back. The next morning, I called a lawyer Patricia had recommended. Elder law attorney James Morrison had handled several cases of family financial abuse. His voice was kind but professional when I explained my situation. "Mrs. Davis, I want you to know that what you're describing is unfortunately more common than you might think. Adult children who feel entitled to their parents' assets sometimes resort to very aggressive tactics. The good news is that you're still mentally competent and legally in control of your property. No one can force you to sign anything." "But they're pressuring me constantly," I said, "and they're making my life miserable." "That's harassment and it's illegal. I'd like to meet with you this week to discuss your options. Can you come to my office without them knowing?" "I think so," I said, feeling hopeful for the first time in months. "Good. And Mrs. Davis, until we meet, don't sign anything. Nothing at all, no matter how they pressure you. And if possible, try to record any conversations where they threaten or coerce you. We'll need evidence if this goes to court." After I hung up, I felt stronger than I had in months. I had a plan, I had allies, and I had the law on my side. But I underestimated how desperate they were becoming. That evening, Jennifer came home from work with Michael close behind her. They both looked tense, and I could tell they'd been arguing in the car. Jennifer's eyes were red like she'd been crying, and Michael's jaw was clenched tight. They found me in the living room reading one of Robert's old books. Jennifer sat down across from me, while Michael stood behind her like a bodyguard. "Mom, we need to talk," Jennifer said, and her voice had a quality I'd never heard before. Desperate, almost frantic. "What about?" I asked, though I knew exactly what this was about. "The papers, the estate planning documents, we can't wait anymore." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. Her face was thinner than it had been when she moved in, and there were dark circles under her eyes. She looked exhausted and stressed, and for a moment I felt a flicker of the maternal concern that had ruled my life for 40 years. "Jennifer, what's wrong?" I asked. "You look terrible." She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "What's wrong?" "Mom, we're living in limbo here. Michael can't get a job because we don't know where we'll be living long term. The kids are getting attached to this house, to this life, and we can't make any plans because you won't secure their future. Their future? Yes. Emma wants to take piano lessons, but we can't afford them without knowing our financial situation. Tommy needs speech therapy, but insurance won't cover it, and we can't pay out of pocket while we're living in uncertainty. You're hurting your own grandchildren by being stubborn about this. The manipulation was so smooth, so practiced, that for a moment I almost believed her, making me responsible for the children's problems, painting my desire to keep my own home as selfishness that hurt innocent kids. But then Michael spoke, and his mask slipped completely. "Margaret, let's cut the crap here. This house is worth a fortune, and you're sitting on it like a dragon guarding gold. You're old. You don't need a 4-bedroom house. You could live very comfortably in a nice senior community while we use this asset responsibly for the family's benefit." "Michael," Jennifer warned, but he was past caring about diplomacy. "No, Jennifer, I'm tired of tiptoeing around this. Your mother is being selfish, pure, and simple. She's more concerned with some sentimental attachment to this place than she is with her family's welfare." I stood up slowly, feeling surprisingly calm. "This is my house, Michael. Mine and Robert's. We earned it, we paid for it, and we planned to leave it to our daughter when we died, not before." "When you died could be another 20 years, Michael exploded. "You expect us to put our lives on hold for 20 years while you play house in a $3 million property." The honesty was brutal, but clarifying. This wasn't about my welfare or the children's needs. This was about them wanting my money and being angry that they had to wait for me to die to get it. "Get out," I said quietly. "What?" Jennifer looked shocked. "Get out of my house, all of you. I want you gone by the end of the week." The silence that followed was deafening. Jennifer's face went through a series of expressions: shock, hurt, anger, and finally, something that looked like panic. "Mom, you can't be serious. We live here. The kids go to school here. You can't just throw us out." "I'm not throwing you out. I'm asking you to leave my house and stop trying to steal it from me." Michael's face was turning red. "You ungrateful old woman. We've been taking care of you, putting our lives on hold for you, and this is how you repay us?" "Taking care of me?" I laughed, and the sound surprised me. It wasn't bitter or angry, it was almost relieved. "You've been waiting for me to die while pretending to love me. That's not taking care of me, Michael. That's elder abuse." The words hung in the air like a bomb. Jennifer went very pale. "Mom, you don't mean that." "I absolutely mean it. I know what you've been doing. I've heard your conversations. I know about the lawyers and the contractors and the timeline. I know you've been planning to take my house and stick me in some facility to die." "That's not... we never..." Jennifer was stammering, but her face told the truth. "I want you out," I repeated. 1 week. Michael stepped forward, and something in his posture made me take a step back. There was violence in his eyes, rage that was barely contained. "We're not going anywhere," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "This is our home now, and you're just going to have to accept that." "It's not your home. It's mine." "Not for long," he said, and the threat in those words made my blood run cold. That night, I barely slept. I could hear them arguing in their room, Jennifer's voice pleading, Michael's voice angry and harsh. At one point, I heard something crash, like furniture being thrown, then silence. The next morning, Jennifer looked like she'd been hit by a truck. Her left eye was slightly swollen, and she was wearing makeup that didn't quite cover what looked like finger marks on her upper arm. I realized with growing horror that Michael wasn't just abusing me. He was controlling Jennifer, too. The desperate, frantic quality in her behavior suddenly made more sense. She wasn't just greedy, she was scared. But when I tried to talk to her about it to offer help, she shut down completely. "I'm fine, Mom. Everything's fine. We just need to resolve this house situation, and everything will be fine." She wouldn't meet my eyes, and I knew that somewhere along the way, I'd lost my daughter to something much darker than simple greed. And 2 days later, I came home from my lawyer's office to find Michael waiting for me in the kitchen. He was sitting at the table with a fresh set of papers spread out in front of him, and his expression was cold and determined. "Sit down, Margaret," he said. "We're going to settle this today. Where are Jennifer and the children?" "Doesn't matter. This is between you and me now." I remained standing. "I'm not signing anything, Michael." "Yes, you are." He slid a pen across the table toward me. "Because if you don't, things are going to get very unpleasant for everyone involved." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm promising you. Sign the papers or I'll make your life so miserable that you'll beg to sign them." I thought about the lawyer I'd met with, about Patricia next door, about the journal full of evidence I'd been keeping. I felt stronger than I had in months. "No," I said simply. Michael's face darkened. "What did you say?" "I said no. I'm not signing your papers, I'm not giving you my house, and I'm not going to be intimidated by you anymore." He stood up slowly, and I could see the rage building in his face. "You stupid old bitch. Do you have any idea what you're messing with here?" "I'm not messing with anything. I'm standing up for myself." "Now, you want to do this the hard way? Fine, we'll do this the hard way." Before I could react, he grabbed my arm and twisted it behind my back. Pain shot through my shoulder, and I cried out, "Michael, stop! Sign the papers, Margaret. Let go of me." He increased the pressure on my arm, and I thought he might break it. "I'm not letting go until you sign." That's when I heard the front door open and Jennifer's voice calling out, "Mom, we're home." Michael released me so suddenly that I stumbled forward, catching myself on the kitchen counter. By the time Jennifer and the children entered the kitchen, he was back in his chair, calm as could be. "Hi, honey," he said to Jennifer with a smile. "Your mom and I were just discussing the paperwork." I stared at him in shock. The transformation was so complete, so seamless that if I hadn't just experienced his violence firsthand, I might have thought I'd imagined it. Jennifer looked between us, sensing tension but not understanding what had happened. "Is everything okay?" I opened my mouth to tell her what her husband had just done to me, but Michael's eyes caught mine. The message was clear. If I said anything, it would get worse. "Everything's fine," I managed to say. But everything was not fine. Michael had just crossed a line from psychological abuse to physical violence, and I knew it was only going to escalate from here. That night, I called Patricia. "He hurt me," I whispered into the phone, standing in my bathroom with the door locked. "Michael physically hurt me today." "Margaret, you need to call the police." "I can't. The children are here, and Jennifer, I think he's hurting her too." "Then you need to get out of there. Tonight. Come stay with me." I thought about it, but where would that leave me? If I ran, they'd have possession of my house, and getting it back would be nearly impossible. "I can't leave, Patricia. This is my home. If anyone should leave, it's them." "Then we need to force their hand, create a situation where they have to show their true colors in front of witnesses." The plan we came up with was simple. The next day, I would demand again that they leave. Patricia would be watching from her yard, ready to call for help if things got violent. We hoped that the threat of witnesses would keep Michael under control. We were wrong. The next morning, I waited until Jennifer had left for work and the children were at school. I found Michael in the living room watching TV like he owned the place. "Michael, I want you and your family out of my house today." He didn't even look at me. "We've been through this, Margaret. We're not going anywhere." "Yes, you are. I've contacted a lawyer and I know my rights. You have no legal claim to this house and I'm ordering you to leave." That got his attention. He turned to face me, and the look in his eyes made my stomach clench with fear. "You called a lawyer?" "Yes, I did. And if you don't leave voluntarily, I'll have you forcibly removed." Michael stood up slowly, and I could see his hands clenching into fists. "You really want to play this game, old woman?" I thought about Patricia watching from next door, about the lawyer who'd assured me I had rights, about all the years I'd spent being afraid in my own home. It's not a game, Michael. It's my house, and I want you out. What happened next was so fast that I barely had time to process it. Michael's fist connected with my face, and I went down hard, my head hitting the coffee table on the way to the floor. Pain exploded through my skull, and I tasted blood in my mouth. You want to threaten me? Michael was standing over me, his face twisted with rage. You want to bring lawyers into this? You stupid bitch! I'll show you what happens when you cross me. I tried to get up, but he kicked me in the ribs, and I collapsed again, gasping for air. Through the haze of pain, I heard a car door slam outside. Jennifer was home. Michael? Her voice was getting closer. Oh my God! I looked up to see my daughter standing in the doorway, staring at me, bleeding on the floor. For one insane moment, I thought she was going to help me, that seeing her husband's violence would snap her back to the person who used to love me. Instead, she looked at Michael with something that might have been relief. She's fine, Michael said. Just fell down. Old people, unsteady on their feet. I stared at Jennifer in disbelief. She could see the blood, could see that I was hurt, could probably see the fury still radiating from her husband, but she was going to pretend I'd fallen. Mom, she said, her voice carefully neutral. Are you hurt? Your husband? I gasped, struggling to sit up. He hit me. That's ridiculous, Michael said smoothly. She tripped and fell. Look, there's the coffee table she hit on the way down. Jennifer's face was a mask. Mom, you need to be more careful. Maybe we should look into getting you one of those medical alert systems. The betrayal was so complete, so devastating that for a moment I couldn't speak. My own daughter was covering for the man who had just beaten me. She was choosing him over me, money over love, greed over family. Get me up, I whispered. I don't think you should move yet, Jennifer said. You might have a concussion. Get me up or I'm calling 911. Something flickered in Jennifer's eyes at the mention of emergency services. She helped me to my feet and I could feel her hands shaking. Once I was upright, I looked at both of them. My daughter and the monster she'd married. They were standing together, a united front against me. I want both of you out of my house. Now. Mom, you're upset, Jennifer said. You're confused. You fell and hit your head, and now you're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in months. Your husband assaulted me, and you're covering for him. I want you both out. Michael stepped closer, and I flinched away from him. You're not thinking straight, Margaret. You're old, you're confused, and you just had an accident. Maybe it's time to consider that you can't take care of yourself anymore. The threat was clear. If I kept fighting them, they'd have me declared incompetent. My word against theirs, and I was an elderly woman with a head injury while they were a concerned family just trying to help. But I wasn't completely helpless. I'm calling the police, I said, reaching for my phone. Michael moved faster than I thought possible. He grabbed my wrist and twisted until I dropped the phone, then kicked it across the room. No, you're not, he said. You're going to sit down, calm down, and sign those papers. Because if you don't, what happened today is going to seem like a love tap compared to what comes next. That's when I heard Jennifer speak, and her words destroyed whatever was left of my heart. She's right, Michael. She can't take care of herself anymore. Look at her. She's bleeding, she's confused, she can barely stand. Maybe it is time to consider more permanent arrangements. I stared at my daughter in horror. Jennifer! I'm sorry, Mom, but you're not being reasonable. You're putting everyone at risk with this stubborn behavior. It's time to face reality. Michael smiled, and it was the most frightening thing I'd ever seen. Reality is that you're an old woman living alone in a house worth more than most people see in a lifetime. Reality is that accidents happen to people your age. Reality is that if you keep fighting us, you might not live to see another birthday. The death threat hung in the air between us. They weren't just trying to steal my house anymore. They were threatening to kill me for it. And in that moment, Looking at my daughter's face as she nodded along with her husband's threats, I realized that the Jennifer I'd raised and loved was truly gone. The woman standing in my living room was a stranger, and she was willing to let her husband murder me for $3 million. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated a 68-year-old woman who had nothing left to lose.